And we're live.
Hi, everyone. This is Cinthia Moore, the National Lead for EcoMadres. And I am really excited today because we have a new addition to our EcoMadres team and our EcoMadres family. We have Erandi Trevino. She's in Texas, and she's joining us today because she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and things that we need to know. Erandi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why it is that you're doing this work?
Sure, thank you, Cindy. So as Cinthia mentioned, my name's Erandi Trevino. I'm the new Texas Field Organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. And a little bit of background on myself. I'm originally from Mexico. I was born there and moved to Houston at the age of 7. And I lived all over. I mean, we kind of moved a lot in the first few years when we were here, but most of the time I was concentrated in Southeast Houston, which is where a lot of the pollution, like the extreme pollution, is coming from out of in the city. So I really was exposed to it from a really young age. Other than that, I mean, my mom always raised us to be really environmentally conscious. She taught us, my sisters and I, about conservation and respecting the planet, recycling. It was sort of just ingrained in our daily lives from a really young age. And so that my mother's influence has definitely really shaped my values, which is why I think EcoMadres and Moms Clean Air Force is so important, because moms play a pivotal role in shaping those values in children, and all the way to today. I'm hoping to work on these issues and to make a difference. A little bit something else I guess I could add is, as I mentioned, because I lived in Southeast Houston, pollution was really unavoidable. When my mom drove me to school, picked me up, or when we went to, a friend's house, it's very vivid in my mind, seeing the huge refineries and the ship channel, and just seeing these huge smog, like huge clouds of smog coming out of it. And it was sort of visible and unavoidable in that I knew something wasn't right, and I knew people were in danger. And as a matter of fact, when I was in 5th grade and I lived about half a mile from the ship channel, I lived about a mile from it and went to school about half a mile, I learned that kids who live within 2 miles of the ship channel are 52% more likely to get leukemia than kids who live 10 miles away. So it's it's a pretty big deal for when you're a kid and you're sort of hit with this type of information, that not everyone has the same type of experiences because of where they live. That was very clear at that age. And 2, it's almost 20 years later now. I know I'm like aging myself, but it's almost 20 years later now and things are the same. This threat is still present, and it's time for this to change.
Well, and that's why we're excited to have you on board, because it is important to bring the voices of our community. Oftentimes the communities are being affected the most, like our communities are often left behind when it comes to decision making. And a lot of times too, because members of our community, they work 1, 2 jobs, or plus they're busy raising their children, a lot of times they don't necessarily know where they can go and have these conversations, or they don't realize that their voice is important, or because of their legal status, maybe they feel like they don't have a say in what happens. But that's why we're really excited to have you, because you are able to have those conversations with our community and help them realize that they do have a voice and they do have the power to make a change. With that, What are you hoping to accomplish with your work through Moms Clean Air Force and EcoMadres?
I mean, as I mentioned before, primarily I hope to impact change. First, through policy changes, advocating for protections of our children. I mean, children are the most vulnerable of any type of pollution because their bodies and their brains are still developing, and they're the ones that we want to protect the most, right? What are we going to do with in 20 years with a population full of ill adults, ill of young adults? So I want to promote and advocate for policy changes, but the second and really big way, and that you kind of hinted at, is that I want to impact change through the Moms Clean Air Force volunteers. I want to show moms that they can play a pivotal role in making these changes and protecting their children from these types of harms, starting at the local level, but even going all the way to the federal level. Anything that, I think for a long time, there was this idea that anything that had to do with policy and law was untouchable and just not something where we had a say. But today, I mean, we're sort of really fortunate because we have platforms such as this one. We have social media. We have ways to connect with each other and to make our voices heard. And I think that if I can do one thing in my role, it is to show moms, one, what is going on, what are the problems out there, as you said, to become informed, because a lot of times they're busy. Some people are working multiple jobs, and then plus having their children, that's like having three full-time jobs at that point. And so I wanted to make this process accessible to them, to show them, okay, this is how you want to be involved. You want to make a change. You obviously care about your children. That's a given. This is how we do it. You know, reach out to us. Let's have conversations such as this one and make our voices heard with our representatives, with, again, at the local level, with our council members, but even making our voices heard with our representatives, our senators. Yeah, so I want to show people that they have the power within them. Their voice is important, and we can provide a platform for them to be heard.
That's great, and I applaud you for wanting to get your volunteers in Texas involved, not just at the federal level, but also the local and state level, because a lot of the decisions that are made that have the most impact directly are made at the local or even state level. We are so used to thinking of every decision that's being made as being something that's only done on the federal level, but there's so much stuff and so many different decisions that are done on the local and state level that have a direct impact and immediate impact that we can feel in our communities within, months of policies being implemented. And with that, I wanted to ask you, because I'm a huge policy nerd, and especially when it comes to state legislatures, I was really interested and to learn that Texas is also a part-time legislature, just like Nevada. And I know that your legislature is also in session, like in Nevada, but is there anything going on at the state level in the legislature that you are working on that our members should be aware of or should be following?
Yeah, well, so I'll preface this with saying that in Houston, for example, there is a chemical incident every 6 weeks. In fact, there was one just last week, and I found out through a cousin because, he made a little post on his story on Facebook. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there goes another one. So there was this huge fire. It was called the ITC fire 2 years ago. The anniversary just passed last month. But again, 2 years later, not enough has changed. We're still having these chemical disasters around, often, way too often. And so there's a representative in the Texas legislature, Rebs Weiner, who has introduced a really important bill that we're working to promote in the legislature. It's called HB 1820. And it's the first in 2 years, it's the first legislative response. It would be the first legislative response to the rash of chemical disasters in both 2019 and 2020. The goal of these protection of this response would be to provide protections for the health and safety of Texas families, both people working at the plants, but also people living around in those communities, because whenever the ITC fire happened, it really affected people's daily lives in that community. And so the goal, again, of this bill of HB 1820 would be to create not only requirements, but to also incentivize a culture that will change the industry, that will sort of incentivize them to increase compliance and to implement better behavior. Because one of the things that I really think that needs to be dispelled is this idea that if communities that have or rely on blue collar jobs want to continue thriving, or at least financially, that they need to sacrifice the health of their families, that they need to sacrifice how much pollution is in the air. But the truth is that we've advanced a lot. Technology has advanced a lot. So it isn't so much of a dream in the sky. At this point, it's sort of just saying, okay, there are technologies, there are measurements, there are things we can do to make our community safer. And so we need to do it, because otherwise our families are going to end up paying for it one way or another, with our lives, with healthcare costs. And that's just not really, it's not worth these so-called economic benefits.
Right. It's definitely not worth it. And I found, for example, in Nevada, when I started talking to my neighbors, they necessarily don't think about climate change having a direct impact on them, because they think about the polar bears or, other things. But when you start talking to them about the negative effects of air pollution that it has on their health, then they start thinking, oh, wow, wait, I actually have that. I actually have asthma, or, they start thinking. So it's important to have these discussions with our communities and also the companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Or people will say, why are all these kids allergic to so many more things than they were before? There's a reason for that. I mean, it's not like a kid can just invent a rash, right? These are reactions that our kids are having to external factors that weren't there before. So yeah, I agree with you.
Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share in closing?
If you're interested in becoming involved in Texas, or even in just finding out more information and what can be done, please feel free to reach out. We would love to have any extra volunteers, and to just keep this conversation going and pushing these different bills forward, and again, in the state level and federal.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all that information with us and spending time. I'm sure our members are going to see a lot more of you as you get your work going, and maybe later on you can update us on that bill once we see what happens. But again, thank you so much. And we'll see all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.